Chulainn. Chulainn, called the Hound of Ulster Irish, Uladh, is a warrior hero and demigod in the Ulster Cycle of Irish mythology as well as in Scottish and Manx folklore. He is believed to be an incarnation of the Irish god Láeg, who is also his father. His mother is the mortal Deichtine, sister of King Conchobar mac Nessa. Born in Sétanta, he gained his better-known name as a child, after killing Culann's face god dog in self-defence and offering to take its place until a replacement could be reared, hence he became the Hound of Culann. He was trained in martial arts by Scáthach, who gave him the spear Gáe Bulg. It was prophesied that his great deeds would give him everlasting fame, but that his life would be short. At the age of 17, he defends Ulster single-handedly against the armies of Queen Medb of Connacht in the famous Táin Bó Cúailnge cattle Raid of Cooley. He is known for his terrifying battle frenzy ríastrad, in which he becomes an unrecognisable monster who knows neither friend nor foe. He fights from his chariot, driven by his loyal charioteer Liath and drawn by his horses, Liath, Macha and Sainglend. Chulainn's wife is Emir, although he has many other lovers. With Aoife he has a son named Connacht, whom Chulainn tragically kills. Chulainn himself is said to have died in battle, binding himself to a standing stone so he can die on his feet. He later became an icon for Irish nationalists. Name. His birth name Sétanta may be linked to a Celtic tribe, the Sétanta, who dwelt on the west coast of Celtic Britain. His later name Chulainn is usually translated Culann's hound, and was explained in the tale whereby he stood in for Culann's god dog. Although Cu literally means hound, it was also a common figurative term for a warrior in early Irish literature, thus can also mean Culann's warrior. Folklorist Deichtine H. speculated that the second part of the name could come from an old Irish word for a chariot, cull, thus meaning chariot warrior. Birth. There are a number of versions of the story of Chulainn's miraculous birth. In the earliest version of Compet Sean Chulainn, the conception of Chulainn, his mother Deichtine is the daughter and charioteer of Conchobar mac Nessa, king of Ulster, and accompanies him as he and the nobles of Ulster hunt a flock of magical birds. As snow begins to fall, Ulstermen seek shelter in a nearby house. As the housewife goes into labour, Deichtine assists in the birth of a baby boy, while the Meg gives birth to twin colts. The next morning, the Ulstermen find themselves at the Bragnob in the Neolithic mound at Newgrange. The house and its occupants have disappeared, but the child and the colts remain. Deichtine takes the boy home and begins raising him as her own, but the boy falls ill and dies. The god Lugh appears to her and tells her he was the host that night, and that he has put his child in her womb, who is to be called Sétanta. Her pregnancy turns into a scandal as she is betrothed to Chulainn mac Roach, and the Ulstermen suspect Conchobar of being the father, so she aborts the child and goes to her husband's bed virgin whole. She then conceives a son whom she named Sétanta. In the later and better-known version of Compet Culann, Deichtine is Conchobar's sister and disappears from Macha, the Ulster capital. As in the previous version, the Ulstermen go hunting a flock of magical birds, are overtaken by a snowstorm and seek shelter in a nearby house. Their host is Lugh, a member of the Tuatha Dé Danann, but this time his wife, who gives birth to a son that night, is Deichtine herself. The child is named Sétanta. The nobles of Ulster argue over which of them is to be his foster father, until the wise Moran decide he should be fostered by several of them, Conchobar himself, Sainglend, who will teach him judgment and eloquent speech, the wealthy Blaid Brigu, who will protect and provide for him, the noble warrior Fergus mac Roach, who will care for him and teach him to protect the weak, the poet Imogen, who will educate him, and his wife Feinchorm, who will nurse him. He is brought up in the house of Imogen and Feinchorm on Muirthemí Plain in modern County Liath at the Táin part of Ulster, alongside the San Canol Senach. In another version, the child is named Sédonna, and the name is given to him by Seat mac Magach. Seat takes Sédonna into fosterage and gives him to his own foster parents, Israel and Gáe to nurse. They are the parents of Liath, Chulainn's charioteer, and so the pair grow up together from infancy. The County Liath town of Dundalk has the motto made rug Chulainn Crug Irish. I gave birth to brave Chulainn. Childhood. The stories of Chulainn's childhood are told in a flashback sequence in Táin Bó Cúailnge. As a small child, living in his parents' house on Muirthemí Plain, he begs to be allowed to join the boy trooper to Main Macha. However, he sets off on his own, and when he arrives at the Main, he runs onto the playing field without first asking for the boy's protection, being unaware of the custom. The boys take this as a challenge and attack him, but he has a rise-stroke transformative battle frenzy and beats them single-handed. Conchobar puts a stop to the fight and clears up the misunderstanding, but no sooner has Sétanta put himself under the boys' protection than he chases after them, demanding they put themselves under his protection. Culann the smith invites Conchobar to a feast at his house. Before going, Conchobar goes to the playing field to watch the boys play hurling. He is so impressed by Sétanta's performance that he asks him to join him at the feast. Sétanta has again to finish, but promises to follow the king later. But Conchobar forgets, and Culann lets loose his ferocious hound to protect his house. When Sétanta arrives, the enormous hound attacks him, but he kills it in self-defense, in one version by smashing it against a standing stone, and in another by driving a slaughter-hurling bull down its throat with his hurley. Culann is devastated by the loss of his hound, so Sétanta promises he will rear him a replacement, and until it is old enough to do the job, he himself will guard Culann's house. The Druid Cathbad announces that his name henceforth will be Chulainn Culann's hound. One day at the main Macha, Chulainn overhears Cathbad teaching his pupils. One asks him what that day is auspicious for, and Cathbad replies that any warrior who takes arms that day will have everlasting fame. Chulainn, though only 7 years old, goes to Conchobar and asks for arms. None of the weapons given to him withstand his strength, until Conchobar gives him his own weapons. But when Cathbad sees this, he grieves, because he had not finished his prophecy. The warrior who took arms that day would be famous, but his life would be short. Soon afterwards, in response to a similar prophecy by Cathbad, Chulainn demands a chariot from Conchobar, and only the king's own chariot withstands him. He sets off on a foray and kills the 3 sons of Nessa and Séin, who had boasted they had killed more Ulstermen than there were Ulstermen still living. He returns to main Macha in his battle frenzy, and the Ulstermen are afraid he will slaughter them all. Conchobar's wife Mugain leads out the women of Amain, and they bare their breasts to him. He averts his eyes, and the Ulstermen wrestle him into a barrel of cold water, which explodes from the heat of his body. They put him in a second barrel, which boils, and a third, which warms to a pleasant temperature. Emer in Chulainn's training. In Chulainn's youth he is so beautiful the Ulstermen worry that, without a wife of his own, he will steal their wives and ruin their daughters. They search all over Ireland for suitable wife for him, but he will have none but Emer, daughter of Fogel Monarch. However, Fogel is opposed to the match. He suggests that Chulainn should train in arms with the renowned warrior woman Scáthach in the land of Alba, Scotland, hoping the ordeal will be too much for him and he will be killed. Chulainn takes up the challenge, travelling to her residence Dunscaith Fortress of Shadows on the Isle of Skye. In the meantime, Fogel offers Emer to Lugh MacNoise, a king of Munster, but when he hears that Emer loves Chulainn, Lugh refuses her hand. Scáthach teaches Chulainn all the arts of war, including the use of the Gáe Bulg, a terrible barbed spear thrown with the foe that has to be cut out of its victim. His fellow trainees include Ferdiad, who becomes Chulainn's best friend and foster brother. The 2 foster brothers share a very close relationship, sharing a bed at times and speaking often and at great length of their love for one another. This has at times led to speculation that the 2 men were lovers, though this theory is controversial. During his time there, Scáthach faces a battle against Aoibh, her rival, and in some versions her twin sister. Scáthach, knowing Aoibh's price, fears for Chulainn's life and gives him a powerful sleeping potion to keep him from the battle. However, because of Chulainn's great strength, it only puts him to sleep for an hour, and he soon joins the fray. He fights Aoibh in single combat, and the 2 are evenly matched, but Chulainn distracts her by calling out that Aoibh's horses and chariot, the things she values most in the world, have fallen off a cliff, and seizes her. With his sword at her throat, he agrees to spare her life on the condition that she call off her enmity with Scáthach, and bear him a son. Leaving Aoibh pregnant, Chulainn returns from Scotland fully trained, but Fogel still refuses to let him marry Emer. Chulainn storms Fogel's fortress, killing 24 of Fogel's men, abducts Emer and steals Fogel's treasure. Fogel himself falls from the ramparts to his death. Conchobar has the right of the first night over all marriages of his subject. He is afraid of Chulainn's reaction if he exercises it in this case, but is equally afraid of losing his authority if he does not. Cathbad suggests a solution. Conchobar sleeps with Emer on the night of the wedding, but Cathbad sleeps between them, killing his son. 8 years later, Connacht, Chulainn's son by Aoibh, comes to Ireland in search of his father, but Chulainn takes him as an intruder and kills him when he refuses to identify himself. Connacht does not identify himself, as his mother Aoibh bound him to not identify himself or back down from a challenge. She does this as she wishes revenge upon Chulainn for loving another woman after her. Culann was also trained and almost beat his father in battle, but misses his spear shot on purpose as he finds out Chulainn is his father. However, Chulainn hits Culann with his spear, the Gáe Bulg, which mortally wounds him. Connacht's last words to his father as he dies are that they would have carried the flag of Ulster to the gates of Rome and beyond, leaving Chulainn grief-stricken. The story of Chulainn and Connacht shows a striking similarity to the legend of Persian era Rostam, who also kills his son Sohrab. Wastam and Chulainn share several other characteristics, including killing a ferocious beast at a very young age, their near invincibility in battle, and the manner of their deaths. Another similar myth is found in the Hildebrandslid, in which Hildebrand is thought to kill his son Hadebrand, though the poem's ending is lost. Lugh and Dubhogel. During his time abroad, Chulainn had rescued Dubhogel, a Scandinavian princess, from being sacrificed to the Fomorians. She falls in love with him, and she and her handmaid come to Ireland in search of him in the form of a pair of swans. Chulainn, not realizing who she is, shoots her down with his sling, and then saves her life by sucking the stone from her side. Having tasted her blood, he cannot marry her, and gives her to his foster son Lugh and Dirk. Lugh goes on to become High King of Ireland, but the Liath stone of destiny fails to cry out when he stands on it, so Chulainn splits it in two with his sword. When Dubhogel is mutilated by the women of Ulster out of jealousy for her sexual desirability and dies of her wounds, Lugh dies of grief, and Chulainn avenges them by demolishing the house the women are inside, killing 150 of them. The cattle raid of Cooley. At the age of 17, Chulainn single-handedly defends Ulster from the army of Connacht in the Táin Bó Cúailnge. Medb, Queen of Connacht, has mounted the invasion to steal the stud bull Táin Cúailnge. Chulainn allows her to take Ulster by surprise because he was with a woman when he should have been watching the border. The men of Ulster were disabled by a curse that caused them to suffer from labour pains, so it becomes Chulainn's job to stop Medb's army from advancing further. He does this by invoking the right of single combat at fords. He defeats champion after champion in a standoff that lasts for months. Before one combat, a beautiful young woman comes to him, claiming to be the daughter of a king, and offers him her love, but he refuses her. The woman reveals herself as the Morrigan, and in revenge for this lie, she attacks him in various animal forms while he is engaged in combat against Loch Macmovmies. As an eel, she trips him in a ford, but he breaks her ribs. As a wolf, she stampedes cattle across the ford, but he blinds her eye with a sling stone. Finally, she appears as a heifer at the head of the stampede, but he breaks her leg with another sling stone. After Chulainn finally defeats Lugh, the Morrigan appears to him as an old woman milking a cow with the same injuries he had given her in her animal forms. She gives him 3 drinks of milk, and with each drink he blesses her, healing her wounds. After one particularly arduous combat, Chulainn lies severely wounded but is visited by Lugh, who tells him he is his father and heals his wounds. When Chulainn wakes up and sees that the boy troop of a maid Macha have attacked the Connacht army and been sorted, he has his most spectacular ríastrad yet. He attacks the army and kills hundreds, building walls of corpses. When his foster father Fergus MacRoach, now in exile in Medb's court, is sent to face him, Chulainn agrees to yield, so long as Fergus agrees to return the favour the next time they meet. Finally, he fights a gruelling 3-day duel with his best friend and foster brother Ferdiad, a ford that was named after Ferdiad Ardí, County Liath, after him. The Ulstermen eventually rise, one by one at first, and finally en masse. The final battle begins. Chulainn stays on the sidelines, recuperating from his wounds until he sees Fergus advancing. He enters the fray and confronts Fergus, who keeps his side of the bargain and yields to him, pulling his forces off the field. Connacht's other allies panic and Medb is forced to retreat. At this inopportune moment she gets appeared, and although Fergus forms a guard around her, Chulainn breaks through as she is dealing with it and has her at his mercy. However, he spares her because he does not think it right to kill women and guards her retreat back to Connacht as far as Athlone. Bricu's feast. The troublemaker Bricu once incites 3 heroes, Chulainn, Conall Cernach and Gáe Bulg, to compete for the champion's portion at his feast. In every test that is set, Chulainn comes out on top, but neither Conall nor Gáe will accept the result. Cuailnge MacDev manages to settle it by visiting each in the guise of a hideous churl and challenging them to behead him, then allow him to return and behead them in return. Conall and Lugh both behead Cuailnge, who picks up his head and leaves, but when the time comes for him to return they flee. Only Chulainn is brave and honourable enough to submit himself to Cuailnge's axe. Cuailnge spares him and he is declared champion. This beheading challenge appears in later literature, most notably in the Middle English poem Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Other examples include the 13th century French life of Caradoc and the English romances The Turk and Gawain and Sir Gawain and the Carl of Carlisle. The death of Cuailnge. Cuailnge, again in disguise, joins the Ulstermen on a raid on an ice Fairfalga, probably the Isle of Man, in return for his choice of the spoils. They steal treasure and abduct Blathnot, daughter of the island's king, who loves Chulainn. But when Cuailnge is asked to choose his share, he chooses Blathnot. Chulainn tries to stop him taking her, but Cuailnge cuts his hair and drives him into the ground up to his armpits before escaping, taking Blathnot with him. Like other heroes such as the biblical Samson, Deichtine in the Mahabharata and the Welsh Lugh, Cúailnge can only be killed in certain contrived circumstances which vary in different versions of the story. Liath discovers how to kill him and betrays him to Chulainn, who does the deed. However, fortunately, Cúailnge's poet, enraged at the betrayal of his lord, grabs Liath and leaps off a cliff, killing her and himself. Emer's only jealousy. Chulainn has many lovers, but Emer's only jealousy comes when he falls in love with Fand, wife of Manannán mac Lir. Manannán has left her and she has been attacked by 3 Fomorians who want to control the Irish Sea. Chulainn agrees to help defend her as long as she marries him. She agrees reluctantly, but they fall in love when they meet. Manannán knows their relationship is doomed because Chulainn is mortal and Fand is a fairy. Chulainn's presence would destroy the fairies. Emer, meanwhile, tries to kill her rival, but when she sees the strength of Fand's love for Chulainn, she decides to give him up to her. Fand, touched by Emer's magnanimity, decides to return to her own husband. Manannán shakes his cloak between Chulainn and Fand, ensuring the two will never meet again, and Chulainn and Emer drink a potion to wipe the whole affair from their memories. Death. Irish, aided Conchobar, also known as British Mermaid Muirthemni. Medb conspires with Lugh, son of Cúailnge, son of Cair and the sons of others Chulainn had killed, to draw him out to his death. His fate is sealed by his breaking of the Gisa taboos upon him. Chulainn's Gisa included a ban against eating dog meat, but in early Ireland there was a powerful general taboo against refusing hospitality, so when an old crone offers him a meal of dog meat, he has no choice but to break his Gs. In this way he is spiritually weakened for the fight ahead of him. Lugh has 3 magical spears made, and it is prophesied that a king will fall by each of them. With the first he kills Chulainn's charioteer Láeg, king of chariot drivers. With the second he kills Chulainn's horse, Liath Macha, king of horses. With the third he hits Chulainn, mortally wounding him. Chulainn ties himself to a standing stone to die on his feet, facing his enemies. This stone is traditionally identified as Conchobar, located near Dundalk. Due to his ferocity even when so near death, it is only when a raven lands on his shoulder that his enemies believe he is dead. Lugh approaches and cuts off his head, but as he does so the hero light burns around Chulainn and his sword falls from his hand and cuts Lugh's hand off. The light disappears only after his right hand, his sword arm, is cut from his body. According to the annals, Chulainn died in the year AD 1. Cnósainec had sworn that if Chulainn died before him he would avenge him before sunset, and when he hears Chulainn is dead he pursues Lugh. As Lugh has lost a hand, Cnó fights him with one hand tucked into his belt, but he only beats him after his horse takes a bite out of Lugh's side. He also kills Urk and takes his head back to Tara, where Urk's sister Echol dies of grief for her brother. Appearance. Chulainn's appearance is occasionally remarked on in the texts. He is usually described as small, youthful and beardless. He is often described as dark. In the Wing of the Mer and Bacu's feast he is a dark, sad man, comeliest of the men of Erin. In the intoxication of the Ulstermen he is a little, black-browed man, and in the phantom chariot of Chulainn his hair was thick and black, and smooth as though a cow had licked it. In his head his eyes gleamed swift and grey, yet the prophetess Fedum in the Táin Bó Cúailnge describes him as blonde. The most elaborate description of his appearance comes later in the Táin. Saibert sharp at Conchobar. The Saibert sharp at Conchobar, or demonic chariot of Chulainn, tells the story of when Saint Patrick was trying to convert King Lugh to Christianity. In a Teo Street, Patrick visited King Lugh, attempting to convert him to the Christian faith. The king agreed, but on a condition that the saint call up Chulainn from the dead, bringing him to the king's presence. Street Patrick agreed, and then the hero appeared, complete with chariot, and his 2 horse Liath Macha and dubbed Sainglend, together with his charioteer Lugh. The saint asks if the king is convinced. He replies that the appearance was so short he was not yet sure. The saint responds that God is so powerful that the king would see the hero again. The ghostly hero returns, and this time salutes and addresses the saint. He then turns to the king, confirms it is Chulainn he sees and not some demon, and implores him to believe in the saint and his God. A dialogue between king and ghostly hero takes place, in which the old hero recounts his life, including a poetic telling of his heroic deeds, ending with a request to Patrick to allow him to enter heaven. The king is convinced. At the end of this, the saint declares that Chulainn is welcome in heaven. The date of the tale is not certain. A legend of Knockmany. Chulainn was later reimagined as an evil giant at odds with Fáil Mac Cumhail or Finn MacColl. Unrecorded before the 19th century, the earliest known version was a legend of Knockmany in the 1845 Tales and Sketches of the Irish Peasantry by William Carleton. Variants were published in Patrick Kennedy's Legendary Fictions of the Irish Celts 1866 and were published and brought to a larger audience by W. B. Yeats in Variant Folk Tales of the Irish Peasantry 1888, followed by numerous adaptations and variant, many uncredited. The work was included in later collections of folk tales by other editors such as Joseph Jacobs in his Celtic Fairy Tales 1891. In this tale, Chulainn's power was contained in his middle finger. Wishing to defeat Finn, he came to Finn's house, but Finn disguised himself as a baby while his wife Una baked cakes, some with griddle irons inside, some without. When Chulainn could not bite through his cake which had an iron in it, but the baby could, Finn's cake had no iron. In amazement, Chulainn felt to see how sharp the baby's teeth were, allowing Finn to bite his middle finger off and deprive Chulainn of both his strength and size. Indo-European parallels. Chulainn shows striking similarities to the legendary Persian hero Rossam, as well as to the Tremeculae of Hildebrand and the labours of the Greek epic hero Hercules, suggesting a common Indo-European origin, but lacking in linguistic, anthropological and archaeological material. Chulainn's smiting of the hound with a hurling stick is reminiscent of the 10th labour of Hercules, in which Hercules is charged with stealing the cattle of Chulainn and is attacked by a two-headed hound, which he dispatches with a club. Additional Indo-European typological parallels include Lithuanian Vannius, who like Chulainn is the protector of cattle, and Romulus, who is associated with the canine in his youth and is surrounded by a youthful band of warriors, the Macha in the case of Chulainn. Cultural depictions. See also Irish mythology and popular culture section Chulainn. Images. The image of Chulainn is often invoked by Irish nationalists. The Gaelic revival fed into the Irish Revolutionary period with elements of Irish mythology adopted in nationalist symbolism. In Street End, a school run by revolutionary Patrick Pearse, there was a stained glass panel of Chulainn. A bronze sculpture of the dying Chulainn by Oliver Shepherd stands in the Dublin General Post Office GPO in commemoration of the Easter Rising of 1916. Eamon de Valor unveiled the statue in 1935 as President of the Executive Council Prime Minister and described Shepherd's work as symbolising the dauntless courage and abiding constancy of our people. The statue's image is reproduced in the obverse of 1916 medal awarded to Republican veterans of the Rising, the Military Star of the Irish Defence Forces, and the commemorative 10-shilling coin issued in 1966 for the Rising's 50th anniversary. He is also depicted in several murals in nationalist areas of Northern Ireland. An example is the mural painted in 1996 on Leonardine Avenue, Belfast, commemorating provisional IRA members from the area, which shows Chulainn in the centre. More recently, some Ulster loyalists have attempted to appropriate Chulainn, depicting him as an ancient defender of Ulster from Irish enemies to the south. This is based on Ian Adamson's widely rejected theory that Chulainn was a Cruithian hero and that they were non-Celtic people who were at war with the Gaels. He is depicted in a loyalist mural on Highfield Drive and was formerly depicted in another on the Newtown Lloyds Road, Belfast. A statue of Chulainn carrying the body of Fred Dyatt stands in Ardee, County Liath, traditionally the site of their combat in the Táin Bó Cúailnge. A sculpture by Martin Heron, entitled For the Love of a Mare, depicting Chulainn balancing on a tilting 20-foot pole, representing the feat of balancing on the butt of a spear he learned from Scáthach, was installed in Armagh in 2010. Literature. Augusta, Lady Gregory, told many of the legends of Chulainn in her 1902 book Chulainn of Muirthemne, which paraphrased the originals but also romanticised some of the tales and omitted most of the more violent content. It was very popular, supported by the Celtic Revival movement. It featured an introduction by a friend William Butler Yeats, who wrote several pieces based on the legend, including The Plays on Bale Strand 1904, The Green Helmet 1910, At the Hawk's Well 1917, The Only Jealousy of Mer 1919, and The Death of Chulainn 1939, and the poems Chulainn's Fight with the Sea 1892 and Chulainn Comforted 1939, the latter completed 2 weeks before his death. Antiata Peter Ylake, a priest from Castlelands in County Cork, serialised the Táin Bó Cúailnge on a weekly basis in the Cork Examiner between 1900 and 1901 as part of the Gaelic Revival. Padraig Pearse, another revivalist age writer and member of Conmad nó Gaelge, mentions Chulainn in his 1912 His Irish Language Poem Sia, where Pearse personifies Ireland as a mother figure who gave birth to Chulainn, but whose glory days are behind her. Shepherd's statue of Chulainn is depicted in Samuel Beckett's 1938 novel Murphy is devised to mock the Irish Free State and the attitude of its inhabitants. The story of Chulainn and many other characters from Irish Bealodi's tales such as Fern MacCamhill are still taught as part of the Irish primary school curriculum in both the Republic and Northern Ireland. Text in translation. The birth of Chulainn, tidings of Conchobar, son of Nessa, the boyhood deeds of Chulainn, the wooing of Ymir, the death of Aes only son, the cattle raid of Regana, Bracú's feast, the cattle raid of Cooley, recension 1, recension 2, the battle of Ross Novrig, the death of Cúro, the sick bed of Chulainn, the pursuit of Uladh Shira Introlas, the death of Chulainn, the phantom chariot of Chulainn.